under the glittering lights of Bellamy's travelling circus, star trapeze artist Lila Veroni vanishes after her final bow, leaving only a pearl earring, a torn ticket stub, and whispers of betrayal. In the quiet village of St. Mary Mead, Miss Jane Marple unravels a web of greed, envy, and hidden love. Was it the ambitious ringmaster, the passionate partner, the scheming manager, or a vengeful rival? As secrets unravel, one truth emerges: someone wanted Lila gone, and Miss Marple will stop at nothing to bring her back. Chapter 1. The Final Bow. The air inside Bellamy's travelling circus tent was thick with the scent of sawdust and anticipation. Gaslights flickered, casting golden pools across the packed rows of villagers from St. Mary Mead and beyond, their faces alight with the thrill of the spectacle. The evening's crescendo was Lila Veroni's trapeze act, a performance that had drawn gasps and cheers from even the most stoic in the audience. Miss Jane Marple, seated primly in the third row, her knitting bag nestled at her feet, watched with her usual quiet attentiveness. Lila, a lithe figure in a silver-sequined leotard, soared through the air with a grace that seemed to defy gravity itself. Her movements precise yet daring, catching the hands of her partner, Carlo Rossi, with unerring trust. Miss Marple's keen eyes, however, caught something else. A fleeting shadow in Lila's expression as she landed her final somersault and faced the roaring crowd. The young woman's smile was brilliant, but to Miss Marple, who had observed human nature in all its subtleties through the comings and goings of her village, it seemed a touch too fixed, as if masking some private disquiet. As Lila took her bow, her chestnut hair gleaming under the lights, Miss Marple noted how her gaze darted briefly toward the wings, where the ringmaster, Mr. Bellamy, stood clapping with theatrical vigour. The moment passed, the curtains fell, and the audience surged toward the exits, chattering about the marvel they had witnessed. Miss Marple lingered, her hands folded neatly over her shawl, observing the dispersing crowd. She had come to the circus at the insistence of her friend Mrs. Bantry, who had declared it just the thing to liven up a dull autumn. But Miss Marple's interest lay less in the spectacle, and more in the people who created it. People she knew were rarely as simple as their performances suggested. As she stepped into the cool October night, the stars sharp above the open fields, she overheard a snippet of conversation between two circus hands near the tent's entrance. "Lila looked off tonight, didn't she?" one muttered. "Nerves, probably," replied the other. But his tone lacked conviction. Miss Marple filed the remark away, her mind already turning. By the following morning, the quiet village of St. Mary Mead was anything but. News spread like wildfire through the post office and the bakery. Lila Veroni, the circus's brightest star, had vanished. Her caravan stood empty, its door slightly ajar, as if she had stepped out for a moment and never returned. Her costumes hung neatly in their wardrobe, her makeup case untouched, and her small suitcase still packed beneath the narrow bed. No note, no sign of a struggle, no word of farewell. The circus folk were in an uproar, and the villagers, ever eager for drama, whispered theories over their morning tea. Miss Marple, sipping her own tea in the tidy parlour of her cottage, listened as her maid, Florence, relayed the gossip with wide-eyed excitement. "They say she might have run off with a lover, miss. Or maybe she's been stolen away by gypsies." Florence's flair for the dramatic amused Miss Marple, but she dismissed the wilder speculations. In her experience, disappearances were seldom so romantic. People vanished for reasons rooted in the ordinary frailties of the heart: fear, greed, love, or betrayal. She set down her cup, her mind made up. "I think, Florence," she said mildly, "I shall take a walk to the circus grounds this afternoon. The air will do me good." With her knitting bag in hand, Miss Marple made her way to the meadow where the circus had pitched its tents. The festive atmosphere of the previous night was gone, replaced by a restless tension. Performers milled about, their faces drawn, while Mr. Bellamy's booming voice could be heard issuing orders from within his caravan. Miss Marple's presence, that of a gentle old spinster with a penchant for wool and gossip, drew little attention, which suited her perfectly. She paused by Lila's caravan, its bright paint dulled by the morning mist, and noted the curious absence of footprints in the dew-soaked grass. Whoever had come or gone had been careful, or perhaps Lila had never left at all. As she stood there, a young boy, one of the circus's stable lads, scurried past, his cap pulled low. Miss Marple's soft "good morning" stopped him in his tracks. "You must know Miss Veroni well, working here," she said, her tone as warm as a village tea party. The boy, no more than 12, shuffled his feet. "She's kind, miss. Gave me a sweet once. But last night, after the show, she looked scared-like. Didn't say why." His words were hesitant, but Miss Marple's encouraging smile drew out one more detail. "Saw her talking to Mr. Grayson, the manager, by the big tent. Looked like they was arguing." Miss Marple thanked the boy and let him scamper off, her mind alight with possibilities. An argument with the manager, a flicker of fear in Lila's eyes. And now an empty caravan, pieces of a puzzle that did not yet fit. As she turned back toward the village, the wind carried the faint sound of a trapeze creaking in the empty tent, like a ghost of the night before. Miss Marple adjusted her shawl and resolved to unravel the mystery of Lila Veroni's disappearance, for she knew that even in the glittering world of the circus, human nature was never far from the spotlight. Chapter 2. The Ringmaster's Tale. The morning mist clung stubbornly to the meadows of St. Mary Mead, lending an ethereal quality to the circus grounds as Miss Jane Marple approached. The vibrant banners of Bellamy's travelling circus, so festive under last night's starlight, now drooped in the damp air, their colours muted as if in mourning for the vanished Lila Veroni. Miss Marple, her knitting bag swinging gently at her side, moved with the unhurried gait of an elderly spinster, though her eyes were sharp, taking in every detail. The muddy ruts left by departing carriages, the subdued murmurs of the circus folk, and the faint creak of a loose tent peg swaying in the breeze. The news of Lila's disappearance had spread like wildfire, and the air was thick with unease, a palpable shift from the revelry of the previous evening. She found Mr. Archibald Bellamy, the ringmaster, outside his grand caravan, a gaudy structure painted in reds and golds, its windows adorned with velvet curtains. He was a man of imposing presence, broad-shouldered and barrel-chested, his waxed moustache curling with theatrical flourish. His top hat, usually perched with swagger, sat askew on his brow, and his florid face bore the strain of a sleepless night. He paced in tight circles, his polished boots scuffing the grass, muttering to himself until he noticed Miss Marple's approach. "Good morning, madam," he said, forcing a smile that did not reach his eyes. "Come to see the aftermath of our little drama, have you?" Miss Marple's expression was one of mild concern, her blue eyes soft but searching. "I heard about poor Miss Veroni," she said, her voice as gentle as a vicar's sermon. "Such a shock for you all, I'm sure. I thought I might offer my sympathies, and perhaps learn a little more, if you'd be so kind." Her tone was disarming, the sort that invited confidences, and Bellamy, though initially wary, seemed to relax under her grandmotherly gaze. "Kind of you, I'm sure," he said, gesturing toward a folding chair outside his caravan. "Please, sit. It's a wretched business, this. Lila was our star, you see, the heart of Bellamy's circus. Her trapeze act brought crowds from miles around. To think she's gone." He trailed off, shaking his head, and Miss Marple noted the tremor in his hands as he removed his hat, running a finger along its brim. She settled into the chair, her knitting bag on her lap, and produced a half-finished scarf, her needles clicking softly as she spoke. "She must have been very dear to you all," she said. "Such a young woman, with such talent. Did she seem herself last night, Mr. Bellamy? Or was there anything unusual?" Bellamy's eyes flicked toward her, a flash of caution in their depths. "Herself? Well, as much as any performer can be, I suppose. The trapeze is no easy business. Takes nerve, precision. Lila had both in spades. Last night's show was flawless, though." He hesitated, and Miss Marple's needles paused, her silence an invitation to continue. "Well, she did seem a bit distracted, now I think of it. Nothing overt, mind you. Just a look in her eyes, like she was somewhere else." Miss Marple nodded, her expression one of polite interest, though her mind was already sifting through possibilities. "And after the show, did you see her perhaps, or hear anything that might explain her absence?" Bellamy shifted, his boots scuffing the ground again. "After the show, I was busy with the crowd, greeting patrons, you know, keeping the goodwill flowing. The circus lives on its reputation, and I'm the face of it." There was a touch of pride in his voice, but also a defensiveness that Miss Marple did not miss. "I saw Lila head toward her caravan, but I didn't speak to her. Later, I heard raised voices, hers and Carlo Rossi's, her trapeze partner. Nothing unusual, mind. They often bickered about their act. Creative types, you know, always pushing each other. Raised voices." Miss Marple's tone was light, as if merely curious. "That must be trying, with so many people living so closely here." Bellamy chuckled, though it lacked mirth. "You've no idea, Miss Marple," she supplied, her smile serene. "Jane Marple. Well, Miss Marple, a circus is a family, but families squabble. Lila and Carlo were like fire and oil. Brilliant together, but sparks flew off stage. I told them to sort it out privately. Last thing we need is gossip." His gaze drifted toward a cluster of caravans where a thin figure, Mr. Grayson, the manager, Miss Marple presumed, stood speaking to a group of performers. Bellamy's jaw tightened, and Miss Marple filed the reaction away. She tilted her head, her needles resuming their rhythm. "You must have a great many responsibilities, Mr. Bellamy, keeping this all running smoothly. It can't be easy, with so many personalities, and perhaps ambitions, under one tent." Bellamy's laugh was hearty but strained. "You've hit the nail on the head, Miss Marple. This circus is my life's work. Started it 20 years ago, with nothing but a dream and a borrowed tent. Lila was our crown jewel, but she wasn't the only act. We've clowns, jugglers, a lion tamer, though the lion's getting old, poor beast, losing Lila, though." He shook his head again, his voice dropping. "It's a blow. Crowds came for her. Without her, we're just another travelling show. Miss Marple's eyes softened, but her mind was alert. And was she happy here, do you think? A young woman like that, with such a gift. Might she have had dreams of her own? Perhaps elsewhere? Bellamy's face darkened, and he leaned forward, his voice low. If you're suggesting she ran off, I'd wager against it. Lila loved the spotlight. She thrived on it. Besides, her contract was ironclad. Mr. Grayson saw to that. She'd no reason to bolt, and every reason to stay. His words were firm, but Miss Marple caught the flicker of doubt in his eyes, as if he were convincing himself as much as her. Contracts, she mused, her needles clicking steadily. They do bind people, don't they? Though I suppose they can also chafe, especially for someone young and spirited. Bellamy's moustache twitched, and he sat back, folding his arms. Lila knew her worth. I'll give her that. She'd been asking for a bigger share of the takings lately. Said she deserved it, being the draw she was. Grayson handled those talks, though. I leave the numbers to him. My job's the show, the magic. His tone was proud, but Miss Marple noted how his eyes darted again toward Grayson's caravan, a subtle tension in the gesture. She nodded, her expression one of gentle understanding. Of course, you must have a great deal to manage. And Mr. Grayson, does he share your vision for the circus's future? Bellamy's smile was tight. Grayson's a numbers man. Keeps the books balanced, the performers paid. He's loyal enough, but he's no showman. Sometimes I think he forgets what we're about. Heart, spectacle, dreams. There was a bitterness in his voice, quickly masked as he stood, brushing off his coat. Forgive me, Miss Marple, I've duties to attend. This business with Lila has us all in a spin. Miss Marple rose, tucking her knitting back into her bag. Of course, Mr. Bellamy. You've been most kind to indulge an old woman's curiosity. I do hope Miss Veroni is found soon, safe and well. Her words were warm, but her eyes lingered on him as he tipped his hat and strode toward the main tent, his shoulders squared but his step heavy. As she turned to leave, Miss Marple paused by the edge of the grounds, where a group of performers were whispering among themselves. A young woman, her face painted for a clown act, caught her eye and offered a hesitant smile. "You're the lady asking about Lila?" she ventured. Miss Marple's smile was encouraging. "I am, my dear. Did you know her well?" The girl, who introduced herself as Rosie, nodded. Not close, but Lila was kind. Always had a word for us smaller acts. Last night, though, she seemed jumpy. Kept looking over her shoulder, like she expected someone to be there. I saw her talking to Mr. Grayson after the show, near her caravan. Didn't look like a friendly chat. Rosie's voice dropped, and she glanced around, as if afraid of being overheard. Miss Marple's expression remained serene, but her mind was racing. And Mr. Bellamy, did he seem himself last night? Rosie hesitated. He was all smiles for the crowd, but afterward I saw him pacing near his caravan, muttering. He's been on edge lately. Money troubles, I reckon. Lila's act was keeping us afloat. She bit her lip, then added, "Don't tell him I said that, miss." "He don't like us talking about the business. Your secret's safe with me," Miss Marple assured her, patting the girl's hand. As Rosie hurried off, Miss Marple stood for a moment, her gaze sweeping the grounds. The circus, with its bright facade, was a world of illusion, but beneath it lay the same tangled motives she had seen in St. Mary Mead's quiet lanes: ambition, envy, desperation. Bellamy's pride in his circus was evident, but so was his unease, and his glance toward Grayson's caravan suggested a rift she would need to explore. She made a mental note to speak with Mr. Grayson next, and perhaps Carlo Rossi, whose argument with Lila had been mentioned twice now. The boy from the stables had spoken of Lila's fear, Rosie of her jumpiness, and Bellamy of her distraction. Something or someone had unsettled the young trapeze artist before her disappearance. Miss Marple adjusted her shawl, her thoughts turning to the village characters she knew so well. Mr. Bellamy reminded her of old Mr. Hargreaves, the butcher, whose pride in his shop had hidden a fierce protectiveness when his livelihood was threatened. And protectiveness, she knew, could turn dark when pushed too far. As she walked back toward St. Mary Mead, the church clock striking noon, Miss Marple felt the familiar stir of a puzzle taking shape. Lila Veroni's absence was no mere whim, she was certain. The ringmaster's tale had given her a glimpse into the circus's heart, but it was a heart with shadows, and she intended to shine a light into every corner. Chapter 3. The Partner's Passion. The sun had burned away the morning mist by the time Miss Jane Marple returned to the circus grounds, her sensible shoes treading lightly over the dew-damp grass. The air buzzed with the subdued energy of a troupe trying to maintain routine amidst chaos. Performers practiced half-heartedly. A juggler tossed clubs with mechanical precision, and a pair of acrobats stretched near the main tent, their laughter strained. Miss Marple's keen eyes, however, were drawn to the trapeze rig, where a solitary figure swung high above the safety net, his movements sharp and forceful, as if driven by some inner turmoil. It was Carlo Rossi, Lila Veroni's trapeze partner, and Miss Marple decided he was her next port of call. She approached the rig slowly, her knitting bag a familiar weight on her arm, her shawl neatly pinned against the autumn chill. Carlo descended as she neared, his boots thudding onto the packed earth. He was a striking man, perhaps 30, with dark curls plastered to his forehead by sweat, and eyes that burned with an intensity that reminded Miss Marple of young Tommy Pierce, the village lad whose passions had once led him to a rather unfortunate incident with a cricket bat. Carlo's leotard was worn but well-fitted, and his hands, calloused from years on the trapeze, flexed restlessly as he wiped them on a rag. "Good afternoon, Mr. Rossi," Miss Marple said, her voice soft but clear, carrying the gentle authority of a schoolmistress addressing a wayward pupil. "I hope I'm not interrupting your practice." Carlo's head snapped up, his gaze wary. "You're the lady asking questions," he said, his Italian accent thick but his English fluent. "I heard you spoke to Bellamy. What do you want with me?" His tone was brusque, but Miss Marple noted the slight tremor in his fingers, the way his eyes darted toward Lila's empty caravan in the distance. "Only to understand a little more about Miss Veroni," she replied, settling onto a nearby crate with the ease of one accustomed to making herself at home anywhere. "You worked so closely with her after all. Such a partnership must require great trust." Carlo's jaw tightened, and he tossed the rag aside, crossing his arms. "Trust, yes. Lila and I, we were the best. No one could touch us up there." He gestured toward the trapeze, his voice tinged with pride, but also something sharper, grief, perhaps, or anger. She was fearless, too fearless sometimes. Miss Marple tilted her head, her expression one of mild curiosity. "Too fearless? That sounds intriguing. Do tell me more." He hesitated, then sank onto a stool opposite her, his shoulders slumping. Lila, she always wanted more. Higher swings, riskier catches. Last night after the show, she was on about a new stunt, a triple somersault with a blind catch. I told her it was madness. We'd practiced it only twice, and never with a crowd. She wouldn't listen. His voice grew heated, and Miss Marple noted the flush creeping up his neck. She said I was holding her back, that I didn't have the nerve. We argued loudly, I admit, but that was Lila. She pushed, always pushed. Miss Marple's needles emerged from her bag, clicking softly as she began to knit, the rhythmic sound calming the air between them. An argument, you say? That must have been upsetting, especially after such a splendid performance. Did you part on bad terms? Carlo's eyes darkened, and he looked away toward the empty trapeze. I left her by her caravan. She was still angry, but so was I. I went to my own place, had a drink alone. His tone was defensive, and Miss Marple's gentle smile did not waver, though she noted the lack of detail in his alibi. In her experience, those who spoke vaguely often had something to conceal, like Mrs. Clement's nephew, who had once claimed to be out walking during a rather inconvenient theft. You must have been very fond of her, she said, her voice warm but probing. Working so closely, day after day, it creates a bond, doesn't it? Carlo's flush deepened, and he stood abruptly, pacing a few steps. Fond. She was my partner. We relied on each other. Up there, you don't think about feelings. You think about timing, grip, survival. But his words faltered, and Miss Marple saw the truth in his restless movements, in the way his hands clenched. This was no mere professional partnership, not for Carlo. She nodded, as if accepting his words at face value. Of course, but it's natural to care for someone you work with so intimately. I imagine it was difficult, seeing her so determined to take risks. Perhaps you worried for her safety. Worried? Carlo's laugh was bitter. Lila didn't need my worry. She was stubborn, always chasing the next thrill. But she was special. His voice softened, and for a moment his guard slipped, revealing a raw vulnerability. She lit up the tent. Everyone loved her. Too much, maybe. His eyes flicked toward the ringmaster's caravan, then to Grayson's, and Miss Marple's interest sharpened. Jealousy, she knew from observing the village's tangled romances, could twist a heart into dangerous shapes. Too much, she echoed, her needles pausing. That's an interesting choice of words, Mr. Rossi. Did others resent her popularity, do you think? He shrugged, but the gesture was tense. Bellamy leaned on her to keep the crowds coming. Grayson was always hovering, talking contracts and money. And then there was... He stopped, his lips pressing into a thin line. Miss Marple waited, her silence a gentle pressure, but Carlo shook his head. It doesn't matter. She's gone now, and I don't know where. Miss Marple's eyes followed his to the horizon, where the fields stretched toward the village. You saw her last by her caravan, you said. Was anyone else about? It must be a busy place after a show. Carlo frowned, as if recalling the scene. It was late. Most of the crew were cleaning up or in their caravans. I saw Grayson near the ticket booth, counting the take. Bellamy was still in the tent, schmoozing some local bigwig. I didn't see anyone else near Lila. His voice was flat, but Miss Marple noted the slight hesitation, as if he were weighing what to reveal. She tucked her knitting away, rising with a small sigh. You've been very helpful, Mr. Rossi. I'm sure Miss Veroni will be found soon. Such a talent doesn't simply vanish without trace. Her words were kind, but her gaze lingered on him. Noting the way his shoulders tensed, the way his eyes avoided hers. As she turned to leave, she paused, glancing back. Oh, one small thing. Did Miss Veroni ever wear jewellery? Earrings, perhaps? Something special, not for the stage? Carlo blinked, caught off guard. Earrings? Not that I noticed. She kept things simple off stage, said it was practical. His answer was quick, but Miss Marple's sharp memory recalled the single pearl earring she had found in Lila's caravan. A costly item that seemed out of place for a trapeze artist's everyday wear. Carlo's ignorance of it was either genuine or carefully feigned. "Thank you, Mr. Rossi," she said, her smile serene. "I won't keep you from your practice." As she walked away, the trapeze creaked above, Carlo's silhouette swinging once more into the air, his movements fierce, almost desperate. Miss Marple's thoughts turned to the passions that drove men like him. Love, pride, or perhaps a darker impulse. In St. Mary Mead, she had seen how love could curdle into possessiveness, like young Mr. Ellis, who had once followed his sweetheart to London out of sheer devotion, only to return with a broken heart and a police caution. The circus grounds were quieter now, the midday sun casting long shadows. Miss Marple's steps took her toward the manager's caravan, where she hoped to find Mr. Grayson. Carlo's anger, his hints of jealousy, and his vague account of the night before had added new threads to the tapestry of Lila's disappearance. The pearl earring, the argument, the glances toward Bellamy and Grayson, all were pieces of a puzzle that Miss Marple was determined to assemble. As she walked, her mind sifted through the village parallels. Passion, like ambition, could be a spark that lit a fire, and fires, she knew, could consume more than their kindling. Chapter 4. The Manager's Motives. The circus grounds, bathed in the pale light of an autumn afternoon, seemed to hold their breath as Miss Jane Marple made her way toward the manager's caravan. The festive clamour of Bellamy's travelling circus had faded, replaced by a restless quiet, as if the troupe itself were waiting for answers about Lila Veroni's disappearance. Miss Marple's steps were measured, her knitting bag a familiar companion at her side, but her eyes were alert, scanning the caravans and tents for any hint of the truth. The manager, Mr. Harold Grayson, had been mentioned by both the ringmaster and Carlo Rossi, each with a note of unease, and Miss Marple's village-honed instincts told her that his role in this mystery warranted closer scrutiny. Grayson's caravan was less ostentatious than Bellamy's, a practical affair painted in muted greens, its windows half shuttered against the day's light. Papers spilled from a crate by the door, and a faint smell of ink and tobacco hung in the air. As Miss Marple approached, the door swung open, and Grayson himself emerged. A wiry man with a sharp nose and eyes that darted like a ferret's. His suit was neatly pressed, but the cuffs were frayed, and his tie was slightly askew, suggesting a man stretched thin by his duties. He started at the sight of her, then forced a smile that was more grimace than greeting. "Good afternoon, sir," Miss Marple said, her voice as warm and unassuming as a vicarage tea party. "I'm Miss Marple, from the village. I hope I'm not intruding, but I've been so troubled by the news of Miss Veroni's disappearance. Might I have a word?" Grayson's smile tightened, but he gestured toward a small table outside the caravan, where a ledger lay open, its pages fluttering in the breeze. "Of course, Miss Marple," he said, his tone clipped but polite. "Though I'm afraid there's little I can tell you. Lila's gone, and it's thrown us all into a muddle. I've got accounts to balance and a show to keep running." He sat, folding his hands, but Miss Marple noted the way his fingers tapped restlessly against the table's edge. She settled opposite him, her knitting bag on her lap, and drew out her needles, their soft clicking a soothing counterpoint to the tension in Grayson's posture. "It must be terribly difficult," she said, her eyes gentle but searching. "Managing a circus with all its personalities and pressures. Miss Veroni was such a star, I understand, vital to your success." Grayson's lips twitched, as if unsure whether to smile or frown. "Vital, that's one way to put it. Lila was a draw, no question. Crowds loved her, and she knew it. But stars like that, they come with demands, always wanting more money, more spotlight." His voice carried a trace of bitterness, and Miss Marple's needles paused, her attention sharpening. "Demands?" she echoed, her tone one of mild surprise. She must have been a handful, then, for someone with so many responsibilities. Grayson leaned back, his eyes narrowing slightly. A handful, yes. She'd been pushing for a bigger cut of the takings, said she deserved it, being the main attraction. I told her we couldn't afford it. The circus isn't what it was, you know. Costs keep rising. Feed for the animals, wages for the crew, repairs for the tents. Lila didn't see the bigger picture. He gestured toward the ledger, as if it held the weight of his troubles. Miss Marple nodded, her expression sympathetic. "It sounds like a delicate balance, keeping everyone happy. Did she take your refusal well?" Grayson snorted, a sound that was half laugh, half scoff. "Lila, take anything well. She was furious. Last week she stormed in here, saying she'd go to another troupe if we didn't meet her terms. The grand spectacle she mentioned, our rivals. Can you imagine, after all we've done for her?" His voice rose, then he caught himself, smoothing his tie with a nervous hand. "The grand spectacle," Miss Marple mused, her needles resuming their rhythm. "That must have been worrying, the thought of losing her to a competitor." Her tone was conversational, but her mind was alert, recalling the crumpled letter she had glimpsed in Bellamy's caravan, bearing the rival troop's seal. Did she often speak of leaving? Grayson hesitated, his fingers stilling on the table. "Not often, but enough to make me sweat. She knew her worth, and she wasn't shy about it. Last night, after the show, we had words again. She was in a state, said she was tired of being undervalued. I told her to sleep on it, that we'd talk today. Then, well, she was gone." His voice was flat, but Miss Marple noted the way his eyes avoided hers, focusing instead on the ledger's pages. She tilted her head, her smile as gentle as ever. "You spoke with her after the show, then?" "Near her caravan, perhaps." Grayson's gaze flicked up, a flash of caution in his eyes. "Near enough. I was at the ticket booth, settling the night's take when she came by. We talked, argued really, for a few minutes. Then she went to her caravan, and I went back to my work." His words were measured, but Miss Marple's sharp memory recalled Rosie, the clown, mentioning an argument by Lila's caravan, not the ticket booth. A small discrepancy, but in her experience, such inconsistencies often pointed to larger truths, like the time Mrs. Price's alibi for a missing pie had unravelled over a misplaced apron. "You must have been terribly busy," she said, her voice soothing. "So many details to manage." Did you notice anyone else about perhaps when you spoke with Lila?" Grayson shrugged, but the gesture was stiff. It was late. The crew were mostly in their caravans or clearing the tent. I saw Carlo stalking off, probably after his own row with her. Bellamy was still in the tent playing the grand host. No one else stood out. His tone was dismissive, but Miss Marple's eyes lingered on the ledger, where a corner of a letter protruded, its wax seal glinting in the sunlight. She leaned forward slightly, her needles pausing. "You mentioned the circus's struggles. It must be tempting sometimes to consider offers from elsewhere. Other troops, perhaps, who might see value in your expertise." Grayson's face hardened, and he snapped the ledger shut, the letter disappearing inside. "I'm loyal to Bellamy's, Miss Marple. Been with them 10 years. I don't jump ship when things get tough." His voice was sharp, and Miss Marple's gentle nod belied the spark of interest in her eyes. Loyalty, she knew, could be a mask for other motives, like old Mr. Jenkins, who had sworn devotion to his shop while quietly selling off stock to a rival. "Of course," she said, rising with a small sigh. "You've been most patient, Mr. Grayson. I shan't keep you from your work. I do hope Miss Veroni is found soon. She must be missed terribly." Her words were kind, but her gaze lingered on the ledger, on the nervous twitch of Grayson's fingers as he tucked it under his arm. As she turned to leave, a gust of wind caught the caravan's door, swinging it open to reveal a cluttered desk inside. Miss Marple's sharp eyes caught a glimpse of a second letter, its envelope marked with the same seal as the one in Bellamy's caravan, the grand spectacle. Grayson hurried to close the door, but not before Miss Marple noted the untidy stack of papers, the ink stains on his fingers, and the faint scent of lavender, so like the one in Lila's caravan. She filed these details away, her mind turning over the threads of the mystery. Walking back towards St. Mary Mead, Miss Marple reflected on Grayson's story. His bitterness toward Lila's demands, his vague account of their argument, and the telltale letter suggested a man under pressure, perhaps tempted by more than he admitted. In her village, she had seen how money troubles could drive even the most practical souls to desperate acts, like Mrs. Hartley, who had once pawned her husband's watch to settle a debt. Grayson's loyalty to Bellamy's circus might be genuine, but the shadow of the grand spectacle loomed large, and Miss Marple resolved to learn more about its role in Lila's disappearance. The manager's motives, she suspected, were as tangled as the ropes of the trapeze, and she would need to unravel them carefully to find the truth. Chapter 5. The Rival's Ambition. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the fields as Miss Jane Marple made her way from the circus grounds to the Blue Boar Inn, a modest establishment on the edge of St. Mary Mead, where visiting performers often took lodging. The inn's ivy-clad walls and smoky taproom were a far cry from the glittering spectacle of Bellamy's travelling circus. But Miss Marple's purpose was clear: to speak with Cassandra Duval, the former trapeze artist turned solo act, now performing with the grand spectacle, the rival troupe that had surfaced repeatedly in her inquiries. Cassandra's name had been mentioned with a mix of envy and disdain by both Carlo Rossi and Mr. Grayson, and Miss Marple's village-honed instincts told her that this woman's story might hold a key to Lila Veroni's disappearance. The taproom was quiet, save for the low murmur of a few locals nursing their pints. Miss Marple her knitting bag tucked under her arm, inquired with the innkeeper and was directed to a private parlour upstairs, where Cassandra Duval was said to be resting before her troupe's departure for their next engagement. The parlour was small but cosy, its windows overlooking the village green, and Cassandra sat at a table, her auburn hair pinned loosely, her posture elegant but guarded. She was a striking woman, perhaps in her late 30s, with sharp cheekbones and eyes that held a cool, calculating glint. Her silk dress, though simple, was cut with a flair that spoke of her stage persona, and a single pearl earring gleamed at her ear, a detail that made Miss Marple's fingers pause on her knitting bag. "Good afternoon, Miss Duval," Miss Marple began, her voice as gentle as a summer breeze. "I'm Jane Marple, from the village. I hope I'm not disturbing you, but I've been so troubled by the news of Miss Veroni's disappearance from Bellamy's circus. I understand you knew her, once upon a time." Cassandra's smile was a perfect crescent, polished but devoid of warmth. "Miss Marple, is it? I've heard of you. Quite the inquisitive soul, they say." Her tone was light, almost teasing, but her eyes were watchful. "Yes, I knew Lila. We trained together years ago, before I joined the Grand Spectacle. A talented girl, but ambitious. What's this about her vanishing?" She leaned back, folding her hands with a grace that reminded Miss Marple of Mrs. Langley, the village seamstress, whose poise had once masked a rather scandalous affair. Miss Marple settled into a chair, her needles emerging to click softly as she spoke. "It's a puzzling matter, I'm afraid. Lila was last seen after her performance, and her caravan was found empty this morning. I thought, given your history with her, you might have some insight into her state of mind, or perhaps her plans." Cassandra's laugh was low, almost musical, but it carried an edge. "Plans? Lila's only plan was to be the brightest star in any tent she graced. She was like that when we were young, always stealing the spotlight. I didn't resent her for it, mind you. I've built my own name now." Her fingers brushed the pearl earring, and Miss Marple's gaze lingered on it, recalling the single earring found in Lila's caravan, its twin missing. "That must have been difficult," Miss Marple said, her tone sympathetic, "to share the stage with someone so dazzling, and then to find your own path. You've done splendidly, I hear. The Grand Spectacle is quite renowned." Cassandra's smile tightened, and she straightened, as if sensing a trap beneath Miss Marple's gentle words. "We do well enough. Our shows draw crowds, and I've a solo act that's earned its own following. Lila's departure wouldn't affect us, if that's what you're implying. Why should it? She's Bellamy's problem." Her voice was cool, but Miss Marple noted the slight flush at her throat, the way her fingers tightened on the table's edge. "Of course," Miss Marple said, her needles clicking steadily. "But rivalries between troops must create such tension. I've heard the Grand Spectacle has been thriving, perhaps even looking to expand its talent. A star like Lila would be quite a prize." Cassandra's eyes narrowed, but her smile held. "If Lila wanted to jump ship, that was her business. I haven't spoken to her in months. My focus is my own act. New costumes, new routines. The Grand Spectacle doesn't need to poach Bellamy's performers." Her words were firm, but Miss Marple's sharp memory recalled Grayson's mention of Lila threatening to join the rival troupe, and the letter with the Grand Spectacle seal glimpsed in his caravan. She tilted her head, her expression one of mild curiosity. "You must travel widely with your troupe. Were you in the area last night, perhaps after Bellamy's show? It's such a small world, the circus life. One imagines you all cross paths often. Cassandra's fingers stilled, and for a moment, her composure wavered. We're based in the next town, preparing for our own show tomorrow. I was here at the inn last night, dining with our director. You can ask the innkeeper if you doubt me. Her tone was sharp, and Miss Marple's gentle nod belied the spark of interest in her eyes. An alibi offered so quickly often bore scrutiny. Like young Mr. Carter's insistence, he was at the pub during a village theft. I'm sure you were, Miss Marple said, her voice soothing. It's only that I wondered if you'd heard any talk. Gossip travels so fast in these circles. Lila's disappearance has set tongues wagging, and I thought you might have caught a whisper of her intentions. Cassandra leaned forward, her smile now a thin line. If Lila ran off, it wouldn't surprise me. She was always restless, chasing something bigger. Maybe she found it, or maybe she crossed the wrong person. Circus life isn't all glamour, Miss Marple. It's hard, and people get jealous. Her words were pointed, and Miss Marple noted the subtle shift in her demeanor, as if she were testing the waters, gauging how much Miss Marple knew. Jealousy, Miss Marple mused, her needles pausing. Yes, I've seen it in my village. It can drive people to surprising acts. Did Lila have many rivals, do you think? Someone who might have wished her gone? Cassandra's laugh was brittle. Rivals? Half the troupe envied her, I'd wager. She had Bellamy wrapped around her finger, and Carlo, her partner, was half in love with her, though she'd never give him the time of day. As for Grayson, he's a snake, always scheming, that one. But I've no specifics, only guesses. She waved a hand, dismissing the topic, but Miss Marple's eyes lingered on the pearl earring, its luster a silent question. You mentioned your new costumes, Miss Marple said, changing tack. They must be lovely. Do you favour jewellery as well? I noticed your earring. It's quite striking. Cassandra's hand flew to her ear, a reflex she quickly masked with a smile. This? A gift from an admirer. I lost its pair ages ago. Clumsy of me. I wear it for sentiment. Her words were smooth, but Miss Marple's memory flashed to the earring in Lila's caravan, its pearl an identical match. Sentiment, she thought, or a careless clue? She rose, tucking her knitting away. You've been most kind, Miss Duval. I shan't keep you from your preparations. I do hope Miss Veroni is found soon. Such a loss for Bellamy's circus. Her tone was warm, but her gaze was steady, noting the faint tension in Cassandra's posture as she stood to bid her farewell. As Miss Marple descended the inn stairs, her mind was alight with new threads. Cassandra's cool demeanour and quick alibi suggested a woman accustomed to guarding her secrets, much like Miss Harrow, the village librarian, whose prim exterior had once hidden a penchant for forbidden letters. The pearl earring, the mention of the grand spectacle, and Cassandra's veiled barbs about Grayson and Carlo painted a picture of rivalry and ambition. Miss Marple resolved to verify Cassandra's alibi with the innkeeper and to explore the connection between the grand spectacle and Grayson's mysterious letters. The circus world, she mused, was a stage of its own, and Cassandra Duval played her part with a skill that warranted closer inspection. Chapter 6. Clues in the Caravan. The twilight air carried a chill as Miss Jane Marple returned to the circus grounds, her shawl drawn tightly against the October breeze. The tents of Bellamy's travelling circus loomed like silent sentinels in the fading light, their once vibrant colours muted under a sky streaked with clouds. the absence of Lila Veroni hung over the camp like a shadow, and Miss Marple's thoughts were a tapestry of the day's conversations, Bellamy's defensive pride, Carlo's simmering passion, Grayson's calculated evasions, and Cassandra Duval's polished deflections. Each had added threads to the mystery, but Miss Marple knew that the truth often lay in the small, overlooked details, like the stray threads she so often found in her knitting. With this in mind, she sought permission to examine Lila's caravan, hoping its contents might reveal what words had not. Mr. Bellamy, though visibly reluctant, granted her request after a murmured consultation with Inspector Craddock, who had arrived to oversee the official inquiry. "Don't disturb anything, Miss Marple," Bellamy cautioned, his moustache twitching with unease. "The police have already looked, but they found nothing out of the ordinary." His tone suggested he doubted an elderly spinster could do better, but Miss Marple's serene smile gave no hint of her determination. She thanked him kindly and approached Lila's caravan, a compact structure painted in soft blues. Its door still ajar, as if waiting for its occupant's return. The interior was modest but tidy, a reflection of a life lived on the move. A narrow bed was neatly made, its quilt a patchwork of faded colours. A small wardrobe held Lila's performance costumes, sequined leotards and flowing capes, their glitter catching the dim light of Miss Marple's borrowed lantern. A dressing table bore a simple mirror, a comb, and a jar of face powder, its lid slightly askew. The air held a faint trace of lavender, a scent Miss Marple had noted in Grayson's caravan, though here it was stronger, as if Lila had worn it often. The tidiness struck her as unusual. In her experience, a young woman's sudden departure, whether by choice or force, left traces of haste, like the scattered belongings of Miss Emily's niece when she had fled a broken engagement in St. Mary Mead. Miss Marple began her inspection with the methodical care of one accustomed to unravelling life's small mysteries. She ran her fingers along the wardrobe seams, checked beneath the mattress, and peered into the drawers of the dressing table. In the bottom drawer, tucked beneath a folded scarf, she found a torn ticket stub for a train to London, dated the night of Lila's performance. The discovery made her pause. A planned departure would explain the ticket, but why leave her costumes and personal effects behind? She slipped the stub into her knitting bag, her mind turning over them. Possibilities. Kneeling carefully, no small feat for her age, Miss Marple examined the floor beneath the bed. There, glinting in the lantern's glow, lay a single pearl earring, its lustre unmistakable even in the dust. She retrieved it with a handkerchief, noting its delicate craftsmanship and the tiny gold clasp that matched the one she had seen on Cassandra Duval at the Blue Boar Inn. The earring was costly, not the sort a trapeze artist might wear for a performance, and its presence here, alone, was a puzzle. Had Lila owned such a piece, or had it been left by another? Miss Marple tucked the earring into her bag alongside the ticket stub, her thoughts drifting to the village jeweller, Mr. Hodges, whose lost brooch had once revealed a theft through a similar oversight. She rose, brushing her skirt, and turned her attention to the dressing table. The powder jar intrigued her. Its lid was loose, and a faint smudge of powder marked the table's edge, as if it had been handled in haste. She lifted the jar, sniffing delicately, and confirmed the lavender scent, though it was overlaid with a sharper note, almost medicinal. A closer look revealed a faint residue on the jar's rim, Not powder, but something stickier, like a spilled tonic. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. She had once helped solve a village mystery involving a sleeping draught, and this residue stirred a similar suspicion. She made a mental note to ask Inspector Craddock to have it tested, though she suspected the police's initial search had overlooked such subtleties. Stepping back, Miss Marple surveyed the caravan as a whole. The absence of personal touches, no letters, no photographs, no trinkets, struck her as deliberate, as if someone had ensured the space revealed little of Lila's inner life. Yet the earring, the ticket stub, and the powder jar suggested a story of their own. Had Lila planned to leave, only to be thwarted? Or had someone staged her departure, leaving just enough to mislead? In St. Mary Mead, Miss Marple had seen how carefully curated absences could hide darker truths, like the time Mrs. Grayson's sister had run off, only to be found locked in a cellar by a jealous husband. As she stepped outside, the evening air was cool, and the circus grounds were nearly deserted, the performers having retreated to their caravans. A flicker of movement caught her eye. A stable lad, the same boy who had spoken of Lila's fear, lingered near the tent, watching her. Miss Marple offered a gentle smile, but he scurried off, his cap pulled low. His wariness reminded her of young Tommy Pierce, always hovering on the edge of secrets, and she wondered what else the boy might know. Inspector Craddock approached, his notebook in hand. "Anything of interest, Miss Marple?" he asked, his tone a mix of respect and scepticism. He was a young man, diligent but occasionally dismissive of her methods, though she had steered him right more than once. "A few small things," she replied, her voice mild. "A ticket stub, an earring, and a curious scent in the powder jar. I wonder, Inspector, if you might have that jar tested for anything unusual, and perhaps inquire about train departures to London last night." Craddock raised an eyebrow but nodded. "I'll see to it, though I doubt it'll lead anywhere. The circus folk are tight-lipped, and we've no sign of foul play yet." He tipped his hat and moved off to confer with a constable, leaving Miss Marple to her thoughts. As she walked back towards St. Mary Mead, the church clock chiming 6, Miss Marple's mind wove together the clues. The ticket stub suggested intent, but the untouched costumes argued against a voluntary departure. The pearl earring linked to Cassandra Duval, whose rivalry with Lila was palpable, and the lavender scent tied to Grayson's caravan hinted at his presence, or someone's attempt to implicate him. The medicinal residue was the most troubling. It spoke of coercion, not choice, much like the laudanum laced tea that had once felled a village matron in a dispute over inheritance. Miss Marple's steps slowed as she considered the caravan's tidiness, so at odds with the chaos of Lila's disappearance. Someone, she suspected, had been careful to leave only what they wished found. The circus, with its illusions and secrets, was a world where appearances deceived, but Miss Marple's experience in St. Mary Mead had taught her that even the cleverest masks could slip. The clues in the caravan were but threads, yet she was determined to follow them, for she knew that the truth, like her knitting, would emerge with patience and care. Chapter 7. Whispers in the Village. The evening had settled over St. Mary Mead with a quiet that seemed to hush even the usual chatter of the village. Miss Jane Marple sat in her cosy parlour, the fire casting a warm glow across the familiar chintz curtains and polished furniture. Her knitting lay idle in her lap, the needle silent for once. as her thoughts wove through the day's discoveries at the circus grounds. The pearl earring, the torn ticket stub, and the faint medicinal residue in Lila Veroni's caravan had deepened the mystery, each clue a thread in a tapestry that was still far from complete. Yet Miss Marple knew that villages, like circuses, held their secrets in the small exchanges of daily life, and she resolved to tap into St. Mary Mead's gossip to shed light on Lila's disappearance. The opportunity came with the arrival of Mrs. Dolly Bantry, her friend and confidant, who bustled in with a tray of scones and a gleam of excitement in her eyes. "Jane, you'll never guess what's being said at the post office," she declared, setting the tray on the table and pouring tea with a flourish. "The whole village is agog about that trapeze girl. Lila, was it? They're saying she's run off with a lover, or been spirited away by some rival circus. Though I told Mrs. Price it's nonsense. Girls like that don't just vanish without a trace." Miss Marple's smile was gentle, her eyes bright with interest. "Gossip does have a way of running wild, Dolly, but there's often a grain of truth in it if you know where to look. What exactly did Mrs. Price hear?" She took a sip of tea, her manner as unassuming as ever, though her mind was alert, ready to sift through the village's whispers for anything that might illuminate the circus mystery. Mrs. Bantry leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Well, her maid Ellen was at the circus last night. Splendid seats, she said, right near the front. After the show, Ellen saw a man lingering near the caravans, not one of the performers, mind you. A stranger, in a dark coat and hat, carrying a satchel. She thought he looked out of place, like he didn't belong. And then this morning, she heard from the milkman that someone saw a similar figure near Lila's caravan just before midnight. Isn't that peculiar?" Miss Marple's fingers twitched toward her knitting, but she restrained herself, her thoughts racing. "Very peculiar indeed," she murmured. "Did Ellen mention anything else about this man? His manner, perhaps, or where he went?" Mrs. Bantry shook her head, buttering a scone with enthusiasm. "Not a word, but you know how Ellen is, always seeing mysteries where there's just a shadow. Still, it's odd, don't you think? A stranger skulking about, and then Lila gone. The milkman said the police are looking into it, but they've no leads yet." She paused, her eyes narrowing. "You're up to something, Jane. I can tell. You've got that look, like when you figured out who stole the vicar's silver." Miss Marple chuckled softly, her expression serene. "I'm only curious, Dolly. A young woman vanishing is no small matter, and circuses, like villages, have their undercurrents. Tell me, has anyone else mentioned seeing this stranger, or anything unusual after the show?" Mrs. Bantry's face lit up, eager to share more. "Oh, yes, Mrs. Weatherby, at the bakery," said her nephew, who helps with the circus's horses, overheard an argument near the ticket booth. Not Lila, though. He thought it was Mr. Grayson, the manager, talking to someone in a low voice, sounding cross. Couldn't catch the words, but it was late, after most of the crowd had gone. And then there's the vicar's wife, who swears she saw a light moving in the fields behind the circus grounds, like someone carrying a lantern, well past midnight. Miss Marple's eyes gleamed, though her face remained placid. "A lantern, you say? How intriguing! And this nephew of Mrs. Weatherby, did he see anyone with Mr. Grayson?" "No, but he's a shy lad, keeps to himself. Mrs. Weatherby says he's terrified of Mr. Bellamy, the ringmaster, says he's got a temper when things go wrong." "Oh, and Jane, there's one more thing. The grocer's boy mentioned a delivery to the Blue Boar Inn yesterday evening for that other trapeze woman. Miss Duval, is it? He said she was in a dreadful hurry, ordering a carriage to the station before the circus show even ended. Odd, don't you think, for someone who's supposed to be resting? Miss Marple's needles finally emerged, their soft clicking a counterpoint to her racing thoughts. Very odd indeed, she said, her voice mild. Miss Duval does seem to keep busy. And the village is full of eyes, isn't it? Always watching, even when people think they're unseen. Her mind turned to Cassandra Duval's quick alibi at the inn, dining with her director, and the pearl earring that matched the one in Lila's caravan. A hurried carriage order suggested haste, perhaps guilt, or perhaps a plan gone awry. She set her tea down, her expression thoughtful. I think I shall have a word with Inspector Craddock tomorrow. He's a good man, but young, and sometimes he misses the little things. A stranger with a satchel, an argument by the ticket booth, a light in the fields. These are threads worth following. Mrs. Bantry's eyes widened. You think there's foul play, don't you? Oh, Jane, it's like one of those dreadful novels. Do you suppose Lila was kidnapped, or worse? Miss Marple's smile was reassuring, though her mind was far from easy. Let's not jump to conclusions, Dolly. People vanish for many reasons: fear, ambition, even love. But I do wonder about that stranger, and Mr. Grayson's late-night conversation. In my experience, villages and circuses are much alike, full of secrets, if you know where to listen. After Mrs. Bantry departed, her curiosity only half satisfied, Miss Marple sat by the fire, her knitting resumed but her thoughts elsewhere. The village gossip had painted a vivid picture. A mysterious figure near the caravans, a heated exchange involving Grayson, a light moving in the dark. Each detail echoed the small betrayals she had uncovered in St. Mary Mead, like the time Mr. Ellis's late-night walks had revealed a smuggling scheme. The stranger with the satchel intrigued her most. He was an outsider, yet his presence suggested a connection to the circus, perhaps to the grand spectacle, whose shadow loomed ever larger. She rose, fetching a small notebook from her writing desk, and jotted down the day's findings. The pearl earring linked Cassandra to Lila's caravan, the ticket stub hinted at a planned departure, and the medicinal residue suggested coercion. Now the village whispers added a new figure, a man in a dark coat, unseen by the circus folk but noticed by Ellen's sharp eyes. Miss Marple's thoughts turned to Grayson, whose vague account of his argument with Lila did not align with the nephew's story of a late-night dispute by the ticket booth. And Cassandra's hurried carriage order raised questions about her alibi, so smoothly offered at the inn. As the fire crackled, Miss Marple's mind drifted to a parallel from her village. Mrs. Carter, whose innocent strolls to the station had masked a secret rendezvous. The circus, she mused, was a world of masks where every performer played a role, but the village's whispers were peeling those masks away. She resolved to press Inspector Craddock for more details on the stranger, and to verify Cassandra's movements at the inn. The truth, she felt, was close, hidden in the interplay of ambition, jealousy, and fear that bound Bellamy's circus together. With a final stitch, she set her knitting aside, her eyes bright with the quiet determination that had unravelled so many of St. Mary Mead's secrets. Chapter 8. The Ringmaster's Secret. The morning mist had lifted, leaving the air crisp and clear as Miss Jane Marple sat in her garden, the roses of St. Mary Mead blooming defiantly against the autumn chill. Her knitting lay in her lap, a half-finished scarf trailing over her knees, but her fingers were still, her thoughts consumed by the puzzle of Lila Veroni's disappearance. The clues she had gathered, the pearl earring, the ticket stub, the medicinal residue, and the village whispers of a stranger in a dark coat, formed a pattern, yet it remained incomplete. Mr. Bellamy, the ringmaster, had been forthcoming in their first meeting, but his defensive pride and fleeting glances toward Grayson's caravan suggested depths yet unexplored. Miss Marple decided a second conversation, in the relaxed setting of her own home, might loosen his tongue further, as it had with so many in the village, like old Mr. Hargreaves, whose secrets had spilled over a cup of tea. She sent a note to Bellamy, inviting him for afternoon tea, phrasing it with the gentle insistence of an elderly spinster who brooked no refusal. To her satisfaction, he arrived promptly at 3, his top hat in hand, his florid face showing signs of strain beneath its usual bravado. The parlour was warm, the fire crackling, and the table was set with Mrs. Bantry's best scones and a pot of Darjeeling. Bellamy, though clearly ill at ease in such domestic surroundings, settled into a chintz-covered chair, his bulk making it creak faintly. "How kind of you to come, Mr. Bellamy," Miss Marple said, pouring tea with a steady hand. "I've been so troubled by Miss Veroni's absence, and I thought you, as the heart of the circus, might have some further thoughts. It's such a dreadful mystery, don't you think?" Her voice was soft, her eyes gentle, but they missed nothing. The way Bellamy's fingers tightened on his cup, the slight furrow in his brow. "Dreadful, yes," he agreed, his voice gruff. "The troop's in disarray, and the crowds are thinning already. Lila was our draw, Miss Marple. Without her, we're just another show, scraping by." He took a sip of tea, his moustache twitching, and Miss Marple noted the weariness in his posture. So different from the commanding figure he cut in the ring. She offered him a scone, her smile encouraging. "It must be a heavy burden, keeping such a venture afloat. I imagine Miss Veroni's demands for a larger share added to your worries. Mr. Grayson mentioned she was quite insistent." Bellamy's eyes flicked up, a spark of surprise in them, quickly masked. "Grayson's been talking, has he?" Well, it's no secret Lila wanted more. She had a head for business, that girl. Too much sometimes. A week ago, she came to me, all fire and brimstone, saying she deserved half the gate if she was to stay. I told her we couldn't afford it, not with the debts piling up. Grayson handles the books, but even I know we're stretched thin. His voice was tinged with frustration, and Miss Marple's needles clicked softly, a soothing rhythm that invited more. "That must have been difficult," she said, her tone sympathetic. "To have your star threaten to leave, especially with a rival like the Grand Spectacle circling. Did she mention them often?" Bellamy's face darkened, and he set his cup down with a clink. "She did, curse her. Said they'd offered her a better deal, more money, a solo act. I begged her to stay, Miss Marple. This circus is my life. 20 years of sweat and dreams. Losing Lila would have been the end of us." His voice cracked, and for a moment Miss Marple saw not the showman, but a man fighting to hold his world together, much like Mr. Jenkins, the village grocer, whose pride in his shop had masked a desperate struggle with debt. She leaned forward slightly, her eyes kind but probing. "And that night, after the show, you mentioned hearing her argue with Carlo. Did you see her yourself, perhaps, or overhear anything else?" Bellamy hesitated, his fingers drumming on the armrest. "I was busy with the patrons, local gentry, you know, keeping them sweet for future shows. But I did see Lila later, near her caravan. She was with Grayson, talking heatedly. I didn't catch the words, but she looked upset. I thought it was about money again. I meant to check on her, but by the time I was free, she was gone." His voice was low, and Miss Marple noted the way his eyes darted to the window, as if avoiding her gaze. "Near her caravan," she echoed, her needles pausing. "That's curious. Mr. Grayson said he spoke to her by the ticket booth. Such small details can be so confusing, can't they?" Her tone was mild, but her mind was alert, recalling the village nephew's account of Grayson's late-night argument by the ticket booth, and Rosie's mention of a dispute near Lila's caravan. The discrepancy was small, but significant, like the mismatched times in Mrs. Carter's alibi for a stolen brooch. Bellamy's moustache twitched, and he cleared his throat. "Ticket booth, caravan. It was dark and I was distracted. Could have been either. Grayson's always hovering around Lila anyway. Contracts, schedules, all that nonsense. I leave it to him." His words were dismissive, but Miss Marple caught the edge in his voice. The same tension she had seen when he glanced at Grayson's caravan during their first meeting. She offered a reassuring smile, pouring more tea. "Of course, you have so much to manage. It's a wonder you keep it all straight. And Miss Veroni, she must have trusted you, as the ringmaster, to look out for her interests. Did she ever confide in you about her fears, perhaps? Or her plans?" Bellamy's face softened, a flicker of something like regret passing over it. Lila wasn't one for confidences. She kept to herself mostly, except with Carlo. They were close, in their way, though she never let him too near. But I'll tell you this, she was scared that night. I saw it in her eyes when she bowed. Not stage fright, mind you, something deeper. I should have asked, but I was too busy playing the grand host. His voice was heavy, and Miss Marple's heart stirred with sympathy, though her mind remained sharp. "Scared," she mused, her needles resuming their rhythm. "That's telling, isn't it? A young woman like that, so poised, yet afraid. Did you notice anyone unusual about that night? Someone who didn't belong, perhaps?" Bellamy frowned, his brow furrowing. "There was a fellow, now you mention it. Not one of ours. A man in a dark coat, hanging about the edge of the grounds after the show. I thought he was a straggler, maybe a late patron. Didn't get a good look at him, but he had a satchel, like he was waiting for someone. I was too caught up to pay much mind." His words echoed the village gossip about a stranger, and Miss Marple's interest quickened, though her expression remained serene. She set her knitting aside, folding her hands. "You've been most helpful, Mr. Bellamy. It's clear how much the circus means to you, and I'm sure Miss Veroni felt your dedication. I do hope we'll have good news soon." Her tone was warm, but her eyes lingered on him, noting the way his shoulders sagged, as if unburdening himself had both relieved and exhausted him. As Bellamy rose, tipping his hat, Miss Marple escorted him to the door, her mind racing. His admission of Lila's fear confirmed the stable lad's observation, and the stranger with the satchel matched Ellen's account. But it was Bellamy's mention of Grayson arguing with Lila near her trailer, contradicting Grayson's own story, that intrigued her most. In St. Mary Mead, she had seen how pride could drive a man to protect his livelihood at any cost, like Mr. Ellis, who had once hidden a theft to save his shop's reputation. Bellamy's love for his circus was a powerful motive, and his secret, the fear he had seen but ignored, suggested a man wrestling with guilt, or perhaps something darker. As the door closed behind him, Miss Marple returned to her parlour, her thoughts a whirl of connections. The ringmaster's tale had revealed a crack in his facade, and the stranger's presence hinted at an outside force at play. She resolved to press Grayson on his conflicting account, and to learn more about the grand spectacle's interest in Lila. The circus, she mused, was a world of spectacle, but its secrets were as human as those of her village, and she was determined to uncover them with the same quiet persistence that had solved so many mysteries before. Chapter 9. A Partner's Confession. The morning sun filtered through the lace curtains of Miss Jane Marple's cottage, casting delicate patterns across the parlour floor, as she prepared for another visit to Bellamy's travelling circus. Her knitting bag, ever present, rested by her side, but her thoughts were far from the half-finished scarf within. The clues she had gathered, the pearl earring, the ticket stub, the medicinal residue, and the village whispers of a stranger, had begun to form a picture. Yet it remained maddeningly incomplete. Mr. Bellamy's admission of Lila Veroni's fear, and his mention of a heated exchange between her and Mr. Grayson, had deepened Miss Marple's suspicion that the truth lay in the tensions among the circus folk. Carlo Rossi, Lila's trapeze partner, with his brooding intensity and vague alibi, warranted a closer look, and Miss Marple resolved to draw him out, as she had so often done with reticent villagers like young Tommy Pierce, whose secrets had spilled under her gentle persistence. She arrived at the circus grounds just as the troupe began their morning preparations, the air filled with the clatter of rigging and the low hum of voices. The main tent stood quiet, its flaps closed, but the trapeze rig was alive with movement. Carlo was there, alone, swinging with a ferocity that spoke of more than practice. His dark curls were damp with sweat, and his movements, though precise, carried an edge of recklessness, as if he were purging some inner turmoil. Miss Marple watched from below, her shawl neatly pinned, her expression one of quiet interest, until he noticed her and descended, landing with a thud that sent a puff of sawdust into the air. "Miss Marple," he said, his Italian accent thick with wariness. "Back again? You're persistent, I'll give you that." His tone was gruff, but his eyes, dark and restless, betrayed a flicker of unease as he wiped his hands on a rag. "I hope I'm not intruding, Mr. Rossi," she replied, her voice as warm as a village tea party. "I was so struck by your performance the other night, so daring, so precise. It must take such trust working with Miss Veroni. I thought you might share a little more about her, to help us understand what's happened." She settled onto a nearby bench, her knitting bag at her feet, and drew out her needles. Their soft clicking, a gentle invitation to talk. Carlo hesitated, his jaw tightening, then sat heavily opposite her, his hands still clutching the rag. "What's to understand? Lila's gone. No note, no word. I've told you what I know. She was reckless, always pushing for more. We argued that night, like I said. I left her by her caravan and went to mine, that's all." His words were clipped, but Miss Marple noted the way his fingers twisted the rag, the slight tremor in his voice. She nodded, her needles moving steadily. "Yes, you mentioned your disagreement about a new stunt. It must be trying, working so closely with someone so strong-willed." I imagine you two were quite close, in your way." Her tone was sympathetic, but her eyes were sharp, watching for any crack in his defences. Carlo's flush deepened, and he looked away, toward the empty trapeze. "Close? We had to be. Up there, you're each other's lifeline. One slip, and it's over. She was everything up there, grace, fire, nerve. But off stage, he trailed off, his voice catching, and Miss Marple's needles paused, her silence a gentle pressure. "Off stage," she prompted, her voice soft but insistent. "It's different, isn't it, when the lights go down? I've seen it in my village. People who shine in public often carry private burdens." Carlo's eyes met hers, and for a moment the defiance in them faltered. "Private burdens," he echoed, his voice low. "You don't know the half of it, Miss Marple. Lila, she was a star, but she didn't let anyone in. Not really. I thought maybe—" He stopped, his hands clenching, and Miss Marple's heart stirred with recognition. She had seen that look before, in young Mr. Ellis, whose unrequited love for a shop girl had led to a rather unfortunate scene at the village dance. "You cared for her," she said gently, her needles resuming their rhythm. "More than just a partner, perhaps?" Carlo's head snapped up, his eyes blazing, but the fight drained out of him as quickly as it had come. He slumped forward, burying his face in his hands. "I loved her," he confessed, his voice muffled. "God help me, I loved her. That night, after our argument, I went to her caravan. I asked her to marry me, told her we could leave the circus, start fresh somewhere. She laughed, Miss Marple, said the circus was her only love, that I was a fool to think otherwise." His voice broke, and Miss Marple's expression softened, though her mind was racing. "That must have hurt terribly," she said, her tone as kind as a vicar's comfort. "To bare your heart and have it turned away. What happened then?" Carlo lifted his head, his eyes red-rimmed but fierce. "I was angry, furious. I said things I shouldn't have, called her selfish, heartless. She told me to leave, and I did. I went to my caravan, drank half a bottle of brandy, and passed out. That's the truth, Miss Marple. I'd never hurt her, no matter how much she broke me." His words were raw, and Miss Marple noted the sincerity in them, but also the gaps. His alibi once again was vague, unsupported by witnesses, like Mrs. Carter's claim of being asleep during a village theft. She tilted her head, her smile encouraging. "I believe you cared for her deeply, Mr. Rossi. And you left her at her caravan alone? Did you see anyone else nearby? Perhaps someone who might have been waiting?" Carlo frowned, as if searching his memory. "It was dark, and I was too worked up to notice much. I think I saw Grayson near the ticket booth, counting money, but I wasn't paying attention. There was maybe someone else, a shadow by the tents, but I can't be sure. I just wanted to get away." His voice was heavy, and Miss Marple's thoughts turned to the stranger with the satchel, mentioned by both Bellamy and the village gossip. "You've been very candid, Mr. Rossi," she said, tucking her knitting away. "It can't be easy, bearing such feelings. I wonder, though, did Lila ever wear jewelry off stage? Earrings, perhaps, that might have been special to her?" Carlo blinked, caught off guard. "Jewelry? No, she was practical, kept things simple for the trapeze. Maybe a necklace sometimes, but nothing fancy like earrings. Why do you ask?" His confusion seemed genuine, and Miss Marple's mind returned to the pearl earring in Lila's caravan, its match on Cassandra Duval's ear. Carlo's ignorance of it suggested it was not Lila's, but perhaps a clue left by another. "Just a thought," she said, rising with a small sigh. "You've been most helpful, Mr. Rossi. I do hope we'll find Miss Veroni soon, safe and well." Her tone was warm, but her eyes lingered on him, noting the slump of his shoulders, the weight of his confession. As she walked away, the trapeze rig creaking behind her, Miss Marple's thoughts were a whirl of connections. Carlo's love for Lila, his rejected proposal, and his anger painted a picture of a man driven by passion. Yet his grief seemed too raw for deceit. His vague alibi, however, and the shadow he mentioned by the tents aligned with the village's talk of a stranger. In St. Mary Mead, Miss Marple had seen how love could twist into desperation, like young Mr. Carter's obsession with a barmaid that had ended in a public brawl. Carlo's story added a new thread to the mystery, but it was the pearl earring and the stranger that tugged at her most. She resolved to check Grayson's movements more closely, and to pursue the link to the grand spectacle, whose shadow loomed ever larger. The circus, like her village, was a place of hidden hearts, and Miss Marple was determined to uncover the one that had spirited Lila away. Chapter 10. The Manager's Deception. The morning air in St. Mary Mead carried a sharpness that hinted at winter's approach, and Miss Jane Marple wrapped her shawl more tightly as she made her way to the police station. A modest building tucked behind the village green. Her knitting bag swung gently at her side, a familiar companion, but her thoughts were far from the scarf within. The clues she had gathered, the pearl earring, the ticket stub, the medicinal residue, the stranger with the satchel, and Carlo Rossi's heartfelt confession, had woven a complex web. Yet the heart of Lila Veroni's disappearance remained elusive. Mr. Harold Grayson, the circus manager, had emerged as a figure of particular interest, his conflicting accounts and nervous demeanor suggesting a man with secrets. Miss Marple's village instincts, honed by years of unraveling small betrayals, told her that Grayson's story held a key, and she resolved to press him further, with the aid of Inspector Craddock's official authority. At the station, Inspector Craddock greeted her with a mix of respect and mild exasperation. His youthful face creased with the strain of a case that offered few leads. "Miss Marple," he said, offering her a chair, "you've been busy, haven't you? The circus folk are starting to grumble about your questions, though Bellamy seems to think you're harmless." His tone held a trace of amusement, but Miss Marple's serene smile gave no hint of the determination beneath. "I'm only trying to help, Inspector," she said, settling into the chair and drawing out her knitting. "Miss Veroni's absence is such a puzzle, and I've found that small details often lead to the truth. I wonder if you've had any luck with that powder jar from her caravan, or with inquiries about the stranger seen near the grounds." Craddock sighed, flipping open his notebook. "The jar's with the chemist in Much Benham, but it'll take a day or two for results. As for the stranger, we've got nothing solid. A few villagers mentioned a man in a dark coat, but no clear description. I'm beginning to think he's a ghost." He leaned back, rubbing his temples. The circus folk aren't helping much either, too busy pointing fingers at each other. Miss Marple's needles clicked softly, her eyes bright with interest. "That's often the way, isn't it? People close ranks when they're afraid. I've been thinking about Mr. Grayson, the manager. His account of speaking with Lila by the ticket booth doesn't quite match what others have said. Mr. Bellamy saw them near her caravan, and a village lad overheard an argument there too. I wonder if we might have another word with him, perhaps with a firmer hand." Craddock raised an eyebrow but nodded. "You've a nose for this, Miss Marple. I'll send for Grayson. But what's your angle? You think he's hiding something?" Miss Marple's smile was gentle. "In my experience, Inspector, discrepancies in a story often point to a truth someone wishes to conceal, like Mrs. Carter's tales of visiting a friend when her silver went missing. Grayson's nervous, and there's that letter with the Grand Spectacle's seal in his caravan. It's worth a closer look." An hour later, Grayson arrived at the station, his wiry frame tense, his sharp eyes darting between Miss Marple and Craddock. His suit was as neatly pressed as before, but the frayed cuffs seemed more pronounced, and a faint sheen of sweat glistened on his brow despite the cool day. "Inspector Miss Marple," he said, his voice clipped, "I've told you everything I know about Lila. This is a waste of time. I've a circus to run." Craddock leaned forward, his tone firm. "We'll decide what's a waste, Mr. Grayson. There's a problem with your story. You said you argued with Lila by the ticket booth after the show, but we've witnesses placing you near her caravan. Care to explain?" Grayson's fingers twitched, and he adjusted his tie, a nervous habit Miss Marple had noted before. "Witnesses. People see what they want in the dark. It was the ticket booth, I'm sure of it. Lila came to me, ranting about her contract again. I told her to calm down and talk in the morning, that's all." His voice was steady, but Miss Marple caught the slight tremor in his hands, like Mr. Jenkins when questioned about his shop's missing funds. She tilted her head, her needles clicking softly. "It's easy to be mistaken, Mr. Grayson, with so much happening after a show. But there's another matter, the letter in your caravan, with the Grand Spectacle's seal. You mentioned they were a rival, and Lila had spoken of joining them. Might they have made you an offer perhaps to secure her services?" Grayson's face paled, and he sat back, his eyes narrowing. "That letter? It was nothing, just business correspondence. They're always sniffing around, trying to poach talent. I told them Lila was under contract, and that was that." His words were quick, but Miss Marple's gentle smile did not waver, her mind recalling the crumpled letter in Bellamy's caravan, its twin in Grayson's. Craddock, sensing an opening, pressed further. "We've reason to believe you've been in contact with the Grand Spectacle, more than you're letting on. I'm authorizing a search of your caravan, Grayson. If there's anything you want to tell us, now's the time." Grayson's composure cracked, his voice rising. "A search! This is outrageous! I've done nothing wrong!" But his protest faltered under Craddock's stern gaze, and Miss Marple's quiet presence seemed to unnerve him further. She leaned forward, her voice as soft as ever. "It's so difficult, isn't it, keeping a circus afloat?" she said. "All those debts, those demands. A man in your position might be tempted to make a deal, especially with a rival offering a way out. Did the Grand Spectacle propose something, Mr. Grayson? Something to ease your burdens?" Grayson's shoulders slumped, and he ran a hand through his thinning hair. All right, he muttered. "They sent me a letter a few weeks ago, offering a sum if I could convince Lila to jump ship. Said they'd clear some of our debts in exchange. I showed it to Bellamy. He was furious, said we'd never sell out. But Lila was making things impossible, always demanding more. I kept the letter, thought I'd use it to scare her into staying." His voice was low, and Miss Marple noted the shame in his eyes, like Mrs. Hartley's when caught pawning her husband's watch. Craddock's pen scratched across his notebook. "And did you show her the letter that night?" Grayson nodded, his face ashen. "Yes, by her caravan, not the ticket booth. I misspoke. I told her the grand spectacle wanted her, but she'd be a fool to leave us. She laughed, said she'd make her own terms with them if it came to it. I was angry, told her she'd ruin us. She stormed off, and I went back to my caravan. That's the truth, I swear." His words were desperate, and Miss Marple's needles paused, her mind turning over his admission. She tilted her head, her tone gentle but probing. "And the lavender scent in your caravan, Mr. Grayson? The same as in Lila's? Were you there that night, perhaps leaving something behind?" Grayson's eyes widened, and he stammered, "Lavender. I use a cologne, that's all. I wasn't in her caravan, not that night or any other." His panic was palpable, and Miss Marple's serene gaze held him, noting the sweat now beading on his brow. Craddock stood, his voice firm. "We'll verify that, Grayson. For now, you're not to leave the circus grounds, and we'll be taking a closer look at those letters." He nodded to a constable, who escorted Grayson out, the manager's protests fading down the hall. As the door closed, Miss Marple set her knitting aside, her eyes bright with thought. "He's frightened, Inspector," she said, "and not just of being found out. That letter from the grand spectacle, it's more than a business deal, I think. And the lavender scent, it's too much a coincidence, don't you agree?" Craddock nodded, his expression grudgingly impressed. "You've a knack for this, Miss Marple. I'll have the caravan searched and those letters examined. If Grayson's hiding more, we'll find it." Miss Marple rose, her smile gentle. "I'm sure you will, Inspector. In my village, I've seen how greed can twist a man's heart, like Mr. Ellis hiding his debts behind a smile. Grayson's deception is a thread we must follow, but I suspect it leads to others." As she left the station, her thoughts turned to Cassandra Duval and the pearl earring, the stranger with the satchel, and the medicinal residue that hinted at foul play. The circus was a world of illusions, but Miss Marple was determined to see through them, one careful stitch at a time. Chapter 11. The Rival's Alibi. The late morning sun cast a golden haze over St. Mary Mead, softening the edges of the village's thatched roofs and cobblestone paths. Miss Jane Marple, her knitting bag tucked under her arm, walked briskly toward the Blue Boar Inn, her mind a whirl of connections. The clues she had gathered, the pearl earring, the ticket stub, the medicinal residue, the sure stranger with the satchel, Carlo's confession, and Grayson's reluctant admission of dealings with the grand spectacle, had tightened the web around Lila Veroni's disappearance. Yet the truth remained elusive, hidden in the interplay of motives and deceptions. Cassandra Duval, the rival trapeze artist, had lingered in Miss Marple's thoughts, her polished demeanor and quick alibi at the inn, raising suspicions as sharp as those Miss Marple had once felt about Miss Harrow, the village librarian, whose prim exterior had concealed a penchant for intrigue. The inn was busier today, with locals and a few circus stragglers mingling in the taproom. Miss Marple, with her unassuming air, drew little attention as she inquired after Cassandra, and was directed to the same private parlour where they had met before. Cassandra was there, standing by the window, her auburn hair catching the light, her silk dress replaced by a tailored travelling coat that spoke of imminent departure. The single pearl earring still gleamed at her ear, a silent echo of the one found in Lila's caravan. Her smile when she turned to greet Miss Marple, was as polished as ever. But her eyes held a wary glint, like a cat watching an approaching hand. "Miss Marple," Cassandra said, her voice smooth but tinged with impatience. "Back again? I thought we'd settled this. I know nothing of Lila's whereabouts." She gestured to a chair, but her posture remained stiff, as if she longed to be elsewhere. Miss Marple settled into the chair, her knitting needles emerging with their familiar click. "I do apologize for troubling you, Miss Duval," she said, her tone as gentle as a vicarage tea. "But new details have come to light, and I thought you, with your history with Lila, might help clarify them. It's such a distressing matter. Don't you agree?" Her eyes were soft but searching, noting the slight tightening of Cassandra's jaw. "Distressing, yes," Cassandra replied, sitting opposite with a grace that belied her tension. "But I told you, I've not seen Lila in months. My troupe is busy with our own shows. Whatever's happened to her, it's Bellamy's concern, not mine." Her words were crisp, but Miss Marple caught the faint tremor in her hands, folded too tightly in her lap. She nodded, her needles moving steadily. "Of course, you've your own success to focus on. Such a striking hearing you wear, Miss Duval. It caught my eye last time. You said it was a gift, lost its pair. I found one just like it in Lila's caravan, oddly enough. Isn't that a coincidence?" Her tone was mild, but her gaze was steady, watching as Cassandra's fingers flew to her ear, a reflex quickly masked. "A coincidence indeed," Cassandra said, her smile thin. "Pearls are common enough. I lost mine months ago, as I told you. Perhaps Lila had a similar pair. Admirers are generous in our line of work." Her voice was smooth, but Miss Marple noted the slight flush, creeping up her neck, reminiscent of Mrs. Langley's, when questioned about a borrowed necklace that had mysteriously vanished. "Perhaps," Miss Marple agreed, her needles pausing. "Though it's curious, isn't it, how such things turn up? And then there's the matter of your movements that night. You said you were dining here with your director, but the grocer's boy mentioned you ordered a carriage to the station before the circus show ended. In quite a hurry, he thought." Cassandra's eyes narrowed, and for a moment her composure wavered. "The grocer's boy? Village gossip, Miss Marple, hardly reliable. Yes, I ordered a carriage to collect some costumes from the station. Our troupe had a delivery arriving late. I was here all evening, as the innkeeper can confirm." Her tone was sharp, but Miss Marple's serene smile did not falter, her mind recalling the village postmistress's airtight alibi that had crumbled under scrutiny. "I'm sure you were," Miss Marple said, her voice soothing. "It's only that the grand spectacle seems to weave through this mystery. Mr. Grayson admitted to receiving an offer from them to persuade Lila to join your troupe. Did you know of such a plan?" Cassandra's laugh was brittle, almost forced. "Grayson! That weasel would sell his own mother for a profit. If the grand spectacle wanted Lila, they'd deal with her directly, not through him. I'm a performer, Miss Marple, not a recruiter. My focus is my act." Her words were defiant, but Miss Marple noted the way her fingers clenched, the slight shift in her posture, as if bracing for a blow. She tilted her head, her expression one of gentle curiosity. "Of course, your act must be splendid. But rivalries can be so fierce in your world, can't they? Lila's success, I imagine, cast a long shadow. You said she stole your spotlight years ago. That must have lingered, even with your own triumphs." Cassandra's smile vanished, and her eyes flashed with something raw, anger, perhaps, or resentment. Lila was a thief of attention, always was, but I'm past that. I've my own stage now, my own crowds. I didn't need to sabotage her to shine. Her voice was sharp, and Miss Marple's needles paused, her mind turning over the venom in those words, so like Miss Harrow's bitter remarks about a rival librarian who had outshone her. Before she could press further, Inspector Craddock's arrival interrupted them, his face grim. "Miss Marple, Miss Duval," he said, nodding to each. "We've searched Grayson's caravan, found a ledger with payments from the Grand Spectacle, dated weeks before Lila's disappearance, and this." He held up a sealed envelope, its wax bearing the rival troop's crest. "It's a letter, addressed to Grayson, proposing a deal. A sum of money for Lila's delivery to their troop. Care to comment, Miss Duval?" Cassandra's face paled, but she recovered quickly, her voice icy. "I know nothing of it. If Grayson was scheming, that's his affair. I'm a performer, not a conspirator." Her eyes darted to the door, and Miss Marple's interest sharpened, noting the panic beneath her bravado. Craddock's gaze was stern. "We'll need to verify your alibi, Miss Duval. The innkeeper's being questioned, and we're checking station records for that carriage. If you've anything to add, now's the time." Cassandra stood, her posture rigid. "I've told you everything. I was here, dining, as I said. This is harassment, Inspector." She turned to Miss Marple, her voice cold. "And you, poking about like a village busybody. You'll find nothing on me." With that, she swept from the room, her coat trailing like a performer's cape. Miss Marple's needles resumed their clicking, her expression serene. "She's frightened, Inspector," she said softly, "and fear makes people careless. That earring, the carriage, the letter, they're all threads leading somewhere." Craddock nodded, his notebook open. "We'll dig deeper into her story. The ledger's damning for Grayson, and this letter ties him to the Grand Spectacle. If Cassandra's involved, we'll find the link." Miss Marple rose, tucking her knitting away. "I'm sure you will, Inspector. In my village, I've seen how envy can drive even the proudest to desperate acts, like Mrs. Langley's scheme to discredit a rival. Cassandra's alibi may hold, but her heart betrays her." As she left the inn, her thoughts turned to the pearl earring, its match on Cassandra's ear a silent accusation. The rival's alibi was crumbling, and Miss Marple was determined to follow the threads to their source. For she knew that in the circus, as in St. Mary Mead, the truth lay just beneath the surface, waiting to be uncovered. Chapter 12. The Unmasking. The great tent of Bellamy's travelling circus stood silent under the pale afternoon sky, its canvas sagging as if weary from the weight of secrets it had sheltered. Miss Jane Marple, her knitting bag tucked under her arm, entered the tent with a quiet resolve, her sensible shoes whispering against the sawdust floor. Inspector Craddock had arranged for the suspects, Mr. Bellamy, Carlo Rossi, Mr. Grayson, and Cassandra Duval, to gather here, under the pretense of a routine police update. The air was thick with tension, the performer's usual vibrancy dulled by the shadow of Lila Veroni's disappearance. Miss Marple's keen eyes, honed by years of unravelling St. Mary Mead's mysteries, surveyed the scene. Bellamy's forced bravado, Carlo's brooding silence, Grayson's nervous fidgeting, and Cassandra's icy composure. The clues she had gathered, the pearl earring, the ticket stub, the medicinal residue, the stranger with the satchel, and the damning letter from the Grand Spectacle, had woven a tapestry that now demanded its final stitch. Inspector Craddock stood at the centre of the ring, his notebook in hand, his youthful face set with determination. "Thank you for coming," he began, his voice carrying the authority of his office. "We've made progress in the case of Miss Veroni's disappearance, and Miss Marple has kindly offered to share her observations. I ask you to listen carefully." His glance toward Miss Marple was one of grudging respect, and she stepped forward, her shawl neatly pinned, her knitting needles clicking softly as she began to speak. "It's a sad business, isn't it?" she said, her voice as gentle as a village tea party, "when a young woman vanishes, leaving so many questions. But in my experience, the truth is often hidden in the small things. Things we overlook, like a dropped stitch in a scarf." Her eyes swept over the group, noting Bellamy's tense jaw, Carlo's clenched fists, Grayson's darting gaze, and Cassandra's rigid posture. "Let us begin with Miss Veroni herself. A star, loved by all, yet restless, ambitious, and perhaps a little afraid. She spoke of leaving, didn't she, Mr. Bellamy, for a rival troupe, the Grand Spectacle?" Bellamy shifted, his moustache twitching. "She did, but I begged her to stay. The circus is nothing without her." His voice was gruff, and Miss Marple nodded, her needles pausing. "Indeed, you loved your circus, as one might love a child. And you, Mr. Rossi," she turned to Carlo, "you loved Lila herself, didn't you? You offered her your heart, and she refused it." Carlo's face flushed, but he said nothing, his eyes fixed on the ground. Miss Marple's gaze moved to Grayson. "And you, Mr. Grayson, you saw Lila as both a treasure and a threat, with her demands for more money and her threats to leave. You admitted to a letter from the Grand Spectacle, offering to clear your debts if you delivered her to them." Grayson's face paled, and he opened his mouth to protest, but Miss Marple raised a hand, her tone gentle but firm. "And you, Miss Duval," she said, turning to Cassandra. "You bore an old grudge against Lila, who stole your spotlight years ago. Your earring, a single pearl, like the one found in Lila's caravan, links you to this mystery." Cassandra's hand flew to her ear, her composure cracking, but she remained silent. Miss Marple set her knitting on her lap, her eyes bright with certainty. "Let us piece it together. Lila's caravan was too tidy, as if someone ensured no trace of her plans remained. Yet we found a ticket stub for a London train, suggesting she meant to leave. But her costumes and belongings were untouched, which argues against a willing departure. The powder jar held a medicinal residue, not cosmetics, hinting at something more sinister. And the pearl earring, yours, Miss Duval, tells a story of its own." She produced the earring from her bag, holding it up to catch the light. "This was found under Lila's bed, a costly item, not for performance. You said you lost its pair, Miss Duval, but I wonder if it was left in haste, perhaps during a visit you didn't mention." Cassandra's eyes widened, but Miss Marple continued, her voice steady. "The village saw a stranger that night, a man with a satchel, lingering near the caravans. And Mr. Grayson, your ledger revealed payments from the Grand Spectacle, and a letter proposing a deal for Lila's contract." Grayson stood, his voice shaking. "I told you. I only showed her the letter to scare her. I didn't do anything." But Miss Marple's gaze held him, and he sank back, his face ashen. She turned to the group, her tone almost sorrowful. "Lila was not flighty, nor did she run away. She was taken by someone who saw her as a commodity. Mr. Grayson, you were desperate. debts mounting, Lila's demands threatening ruin. The grand spectacle offered a way out, didn't they? Not just money, but a chance to save the circus. You met Lila that night, near her caravan, not the ticket booth. You argued, and when she refused to bend, you acted. Grayson's hands trembled, and he stammered, "No, I swear, I didn't." But Craddock's stern look silenced him, and Miss Marple continued. The medicinal residue suggests a drug, perhaps slipped into her tea or water to subdue her. The ticket stub was a misdirection, left to suggest she'd fled. And the earring, Miss Duval, you were there, weren't you? Not as the mastermind, but as a conspirator, eager to see Lila humbled, perhaps to take her place in the grand spectacle's spotlight. Cassandra's face twisted, and she stood, her voice sharp. "This is absurd. I was at the inn, dining with my director. You've no proof." But Miss Marple's serene gaze held her, and Craddock stepped forward, holding up a telegram. "We've checked, Miss Duval," he said. "The innkeeper confirms you dined, but you left early, and the station records show a carriage booked in your name, arriving just after midnight. And this telegram, from the Grand Spectacle's director, confirms a payment to you for services rendered in securing Lila." The tent was silent, the air heavy with realization. Grayson broke first, his voice a whisper. It wasn't meant to go this far. The Grand Spectacle wanted Lila, and I saw a way out. I slipped a sedative into her tea that night after our argument. She was drowsy, easy to move. A man from their troop was waiting, the stranger with the satchel. I handed her over, and they took her to London to a boarding house. She's alive, I swear." His words spilled out, and Bellamy's face darkened with fury, while Carlo's fists clenched, his grief raw. Cassandra's composure shattered, and she spat, "I only helped arrange it. I wanted her gone, not harmed. She took everything from me once. I wasn't going to let her do it again." Her voice broke, and Miss Marple's eyes softened with pity, though her resolve was unshaken. Craddock nodded to his constables, who moved to escort Grayson and Cassandra. "We've sent word to London," he said. "Lila's been found, safe but shaken, in a boarding house, just as Grayson said. She'll be brought back tonight." Miss Marple rose, tucking her knitting away. "Human greed," she murmured to Craddock as the suspects were led out. "And envy, too. They're so often at the heart of it. Like in my village, when pride or love turns to something darker." Her voice was quiet, but her eyes were bright, reflecting the satisfaction of a puzzle solved. As the tent emptied, the trapeze above creaked faintly, a reminder of Lila's absent grace. Miss Marple adjusted her shawl, her thoughts already turning to the village, where the gossip would soon shift to new tales. The circus would go on, its magic restored with Lila's return. But Miss Marple knew that its secrets, like those of St. Mary Mead, would always linger, waiting for a keen eye to uncover them.